Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out tonight. It's a great turnout. My name's Kate Sexton, and I'm the farm manager at Fields Market Garden. So we are right here in Carmel, just a mile and a half north of here on Smoky Row. But I'm really excited to share some more about Fields Market Garden with all of you, as well as a talk on sustainable food systems.
Yeah, I'm Zach Haselhorst. I'm a teacher over at Guerin Catholic High School on Gray Road, and I've been there about 13 years. And about 6 years ago, I started a school organic vegetable farm, and I teach a course that kind of hosts that farm. So I'm happy to be here to share a little bit about that and to talk a little bit about, sustainable food systems. The elective is called Farming and Food Justice. Farming and Food Justice. So we'll start with this quote from Wendell Berry to kind of inspire us, and then I'll hand it to Kate to get us started. Wendell Berry, farmer, poet, kind of prophet in many ways. Eating with the fullest pleasure that does not depend on ignorance, is perhaps the profoundest enactment of our connection with the world. In this pleasure we experience our dependence and our gratitude, for we are living in a mystery from creatures we did not make and powers we cannot comprehend. So let's start with where our food comes from.
All right, I'm going to start with some interaction here from the audience. With a show of your hands, how many of you get most of your food from the local grocery store? All right. So when you're making a meal and you have your plate in front of you, how many of you think about all the steps it took for that food to get to your plate? Yeah. I've definitely thought about it, but it's impossible to know all of the steps. The diagram up here kind of shows some of it. So the food is always grown somewhere, and then oftentimes there's a lot of transportation involved to the different steps of the process. Sometimes there's processing involved, especially if your food is coming in a box or a bag or a can of any sort. And then, maybe it gets transported somewhere else where they do the finishing packaging, and then again to your grocery store, and so on and so forth, and then to your table. And then how much of us think about our food after we eat it? Yeah? Okay. I know, we digest, but there's also food that doesn't always make it into our mouths, right? So what happens to that food? Does it go in your trash bin? Does it go in your compost bin? Do you get creative and make another recipe with it? These are all some options we're going to talk a little bit more about after this.
Okay, so I'll cover a lot of this may be review for many of you. It may be new for many of you. We'll just try to cover some of the basics on where our food tends to come from today, and then we'll shift into what we consider to be some better options. So conventional, what we mean by conventional growing practices, so large scale, where's most of our food coming from? The growing practices on these large farms, conventional farms, tillage dependent, right? So at least once a year, taking that implement out into the field and tilling up all of that soil, right, to try to get it ready for planting again. And in doing that, you're kind of destroying any sort of inroads that the last year's plants made, and you're making it impossible for any good biology to happen in that soil, right? The soil is rather dead, right, if you till it every year. Another reason it's rather dead, right? Chemical dependent is a descriptor of our growing practices too, right? We're talking herbicides, pesticides, chemical fertilizers, right? Most of the ways that farmers deal with problems in a large scale, it comes in a jug, right? It comes in a big jug, and it's applied with a sprayer. And probably obvious, right, that we deal then with the toxins, right? The toxins in the soil, the toxins in the water, the toxins in our food and in the air. Monocultural, right, like as that field shows, right, like as we're very familiar with around here, there's not diversity, right? Diversity is the key to a lot of health. And what we do is we plant all the same thing, row after row of it all together. It makes for some sort of pretty pictures, but it's not healthy, right? Like nature has a way of dealing with problems if it's diverse enough. But if it's monocultural, that's kind of why you need the spray, right, to deal with the problems. It's also genetically uniform and genetically modified. So what I mean by that is that's all the same gene, right? There's no genetic variety there. And who knows if in 40 years, talked about climate change, if 40 years, what if that seeds, genes, which are really effective today, maybe in a different climate in 40 years, that's not the best seed. And the one that we almost let go extinct was the one that we now need a lot of, right? So trying to get some genetic variety in there so that we're holding on to our future. And then it's genetically modified too, so seeds, genetics in labs getting manipulated in a really rapid thing that evolution and hybridization oftentimes can handle over a longer term. And then when it comes especially to animals, right, we have these CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, right, that's a feedlot of cattle. So a lot of high concentration of waste in those confined animal feeding operations. They're not eating anything off the ground. They're being fed grains. They're not moving. So a lot of health concerns and environmental concerns from those CAFOs. So a quick run through of pretty standard mainstay practices. This isn't, I'm not pointing out the worst of the worst here. This is pretty standard, right? The food that you're getting on that grocery store shelf is probably this more often than not. Okay, so let's talk about impact then. So Kate kind of hinted at this, but roughly 1/3 of the food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted globally, about 1.3 billion tons per year. Where's that? Why does that happen? Well, production losses, right? Pests, weather, harvesting practices, post-harvest handling storage, spoilage, inadequate storage, inadequate transportation, parts of food being discarded or rejected during preparation, food getting damaged or expired or overstocked, and then the consumer waste, as we were talking about there. I wanted to briefly show this diagram about impact of the system here. This comes from actually a really great website that I use in my class. It's called the Food Systems Thinker website. A PhD student from Purdue put this together 6 or 7 years ago. It's called the Food Systems Thinker website. She actually has lesson plans and diagrams. I actually sent her a message this week making sure it was okay if I could use her stuff. And she was really excited about that. But Food Systems Thinker is the website. And she has this diagram that comes from Jaco Klevla and Flynn, are their names, 2004. Just kind of like helping us see the inputs and the outputs for where our food comes from. I just want to point out outputs, right? If we're in our agricultural growing sector, right, we need to be concerned about the air emissions, the wastewater, and the solid waste that come out of whether it's plants or animals, right? If we're talking greenhouse gases, for example, we're all concerned about that for the increasing temperature, the climate change. Okay, food production is a large chunk of the production of greenhouse gases. For example, when farmers are applying their chemical fertilizers, nitrous oxide is often used, right? And this is not only getting into our water, but it can also give off a byproduct of nitrogen, a greenhouse gas, or nitrous oxide. Methane, right? Those confined animal feeding operations, okay? We don't have a process that's natural that can take care of that much manure on a feedlot, right? And so these are the hot spots of methane, right? Production that the nearby trees have no chance of helping with the air. Like it's just way too confined. And then just thinking about the wastewater. If you live near a farm, I've lived on wells my last several houses, and every time we would move into a new house and get that water test done for our well, every time we would be near a farm, and nitrates and nitrites, right, in the well water that you have to treat, and the only reason those nitrates and nitrites are there is because of just the farming practices. So. Same with food processing, distribution, consumption. Okay, we're talking all of those outputs. So that's a quick run through about the impact of the food system. This is still me, right? And then over to you. Okay, one last thing here. So this Food Systems Thinker website is great for my students. We like to talk about those various circles of our food system, right? Like there's definitely food that you and I get from the grocery store that are from a global system, right? Like food from Asia, right? Food from across the globe somehow getting over to our grocery store. But then national, regional, local, household, individual, like all of these levels. And we talk a lot about elasticity and resilience of your food access. And COVID, the pandemic definitely demonstrates this way better than I could have taught my students, but like there were supply line breakdowns, right, because of various things related to the pandemic. Not to mention the possibility of like other things that can impact the global and national food systems, like war or like natural disaster or like geopolitical changes, tariffs, right? All of these changes that can throw off the global or the national. And if you are relying 100% of your food is coming from the large supermarket, your food supply is rather vulnerable. It's not very resilient to any of those things that could happen, right? And so the way to really make sure that your food supply is resilient is making it more stretchy like an elastic rubber band that can handle some stress, is really developing that regional and local and then household and individual, right? Like if you are getting your food from a lot of these different circles and not just throwing all your eggs in the eggs is kind of a funny word to use there, but all your eggs in the global basket, you're going to be vulnerable, right? And I'll tell this quick story. So like a farmer that I sometimes learn from, his name is Joel Salatin. A long time ago, he was given this a few years ago after the pandemic, though, he was given this interview. He's a farmer of meat. He grows chickens and cows. And he started having customers call him about once a month after the pandemic, all kind of a little bit shy about asking, but they were all basically asking the same question of him of like, hey, Joel, could we be put on some sort of a doomsday list? We would gladly pay you $100 or so each month to be put on a list of the people that you'll still provide food for if the whole thing just breaks down. We want to be on, like, and Joel was like, I'm sure I'm not the only farmer getting these calls, right? People started to really realize that their local farmers are so important that they want to be on their doomsday list, right? Of like being able to get food if things break down. So wanted to share that anecdote. Okay, going over to the good news.
Yeah, the good stuff. So Zach and I both practice organic growing practices, and there are plenty of local farms. We're not alone there. So organic means straying away from those chemicals that Zach mentioned earlier, the pesticides, the herbicides, the chemical fertilizers. There are organic alternatives. So manure is actually a really great source of nutrients for our soil, as well as a lot of other natural resources that can come from a farm. And there's a circle. We'll get into this. We've talked a little bit about compost, but all organic matter can be recycled back into that rich, dark compost that we love for our gardens. And so that's a really great thing to help amend and add nutrients back to your garden, as well as biodiversity. So biodiversity can be talked about in a lot of different applications. As you can kind of see in this picture here, we grow a lot of different types of crops, vegetables, flowers, herbs. Sometimes I let weeds grow if they're not invasive, because they're doing a job. They're covering the soil. So we talk a lot about soil health and soil structure in organic growing, and another term you might hear in the sustainability world is regenerative agriculture. So all these practices kind of align with that regeneration of the soil. We're trying to build the soil back up by adding that compost, by planting a cover crop, and by planting biodiversity and inviting when you plant all those different plants and flowers and herbs and different types of plants, that draws in different kinds of bugs, pollinators, soil life, nematodes, worms, all the things, and bigger wildlife too. So that biodiversity isn't just the plants that you're growing, it's the soil underneath and it's the life all around it. So you're really creating a full circle ecosystem with this kind of regenerative agriculture. Something that isn't on this slide, but we've talked a little bit about CAFOs. There's a regenerative agriculture side in terms of raising meat as well, as animals used to be raised back in the day on prairies and grasslands. Cows are meant to eat grass. They're not meant to eat grain. And that's often what they're fed in CAFOs. So then you're getting into more problems with them needing antibiotics and all these other things. And a lot of that can be avoided when they're in their natural environment, grazing a prairie. And then all the manure that they're dropping is actually feeding the soil. It's not building up in these huge amounts that can't really be dealt with naturally. A couple other things on this slide that I'll cover is crop rotation. So when we were talking earlier about monocropping, a lot of times you hear farmers will sow corn one year and sow soybeans the next year. So that they're doing it a little bit there. But in terms of our farms, I know Zach and I probably won't grow the same thing in the same bed for like 4 years. Is that right? So if I grow tomatoes in this bed 1 year, I won't grow tomatoes in that bed for the next 4 years because tomatoes are really heavy feeders. So I may sow a cover crop after that, or a legume that is a nitrogen fixer, like peas, what I'm blanking here, clovers, vetch, all those things. So just having in mind that different plants add and take away different things from the soil, and planning that into your rotation year after year. Another thing that I'm starting to practice more is companion planting. So in between my rows of broccoli and cabbage, I'm sowing chamomile and cilantro and radishes. Just again, increasing that biodiversity and drawing in different types of bugs and pollinators and soil life, and keeping the soil covered. So that's another big part of our soil health practice, is to keep it covered, because when soil is left bare, that's when it erodes. That's when rains and winds take it away. But if we keep it covered, especially with living roots, those roots are holding it together and in turn feeding the soil. So I plant very densely with my companion planting, and I try and plant cover crops as much as possible to keep the soil covered up as much as possible. And then when that's not possible, we'll use mulch. So wood chips, cardboard even. You see in this picture plastic mulch. That's not ideal. Plastics aren't ideal, but it works. Weeds, especially when you're starting a new garden, can be pretty crazy. And so this type of plastic is something I reuse year after year. So it's not single use, but it is a solution. It's not the best.
One last thing is, like, a lot of the most creative and creative farmers in the regenerative space right now are the ones who actually are on their farms incorporating annuals, perennials, and livestock all in one big rotational system. And the amount of buildup of healthy soil that happens when you're putting all of those things all together into one big plan is pretty incredible. It's stuff that scientists haven't seen before, in terms of just how quickly a place can generate healthy soil.
Thank you. So how can we practice resilience? How can we take this into our daily lives? I always tell people the best thing you can do is grow your own. Learn for yourself. Even if it's just a pot of basil or some other herb on your porch, on your apartment balcony, that's a great start. And community gardens are another great option. Find your own plot somewhere and just plant anything, experiment. Plants are pretty resilient, I'm finding out, and I'm sure Zach has experience with as well. So, just try. Just see what the plant does. Give it some water and some compost, and most plants will be happy with that. And I know Fields Market Garden does host educational workshops to help you all along this process of learning how to grow things yourself. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. If you feel like you're new to growing or want some more insight. I think the next best thing is to support your local growers. There's so many different ways you can do this. We'll talk a little bit more about CSAs here in a second, but even just going to the farmer's market, or there's a great online market called Market Wagon. It's basically like an online farmer's market, and they deliver it right to your door. So if farmer's market on Saturday morning doesn't work for you, there are other options. Fields Market Garden will have a farm stand. There are also a handful of restaurants in Hamilton County that choose to buy from local farmers. Freeland's Restaurant at North End is a new one. I know 9th Street Bistro in Noblesville, and I'm sure there's more that are slipping my mind right now. But do your research. Make the choice to seek out something that's local. Ask that extra question when you're thinking about where to go out to dinner that night. Let's see what else. Yes.
If we have any wine drinkers, there's a pretty cool new wine producer on the west side of Indy called Rejoicing Vines. Anybody heard of Rejoicing Vines? They're super committed to sustainable ag, and they're partnering with a lot of other local farms. Really good wine. So I'll plug them in. They're kind of new to the scene around here, but they know what they're doing, and it's a pretty cool new place, Rejoicing Vines.
Thank you. The other thing I would say is get to know your local growers. Ask them questions about their growing practices. Neither Zach or I have the USDA certified organic label or certification, but those are the practices we're using, and you won't know that until you come and ask us. That's the case with I think a lot of farmers. So that I would encourage you to ask the questions when you're at farmers market. What growing practices are you using? What sort of fertilizers are you using? All that kind of stuff. You don't have to be an expert, but if you ask the question to the farmer, you can tell. You can tell what they're practicing. If a farm is a nonprofit or invites volunteers onto their space, that's an awesome way to support local growers as well. The last thing we'll talk about is diverting food waste. So we alluded to this a little bit already, but there are ways you can use your food waste. I know sometimes I'll save a bag of veggie scraps in my freezer until it's full, and then I'll make a veggie broth with it. So if you go online and look up scrappy cooking or that kind of stuff, there's all sorts of ways you can get creative. I know I've used lemon peels and vinegar as a cleaning solution in my household. So there are ways you can get creative and use every part of the plant that you're eating. And if you can't use it, compost it. Composting is, again, I could harp all day, and I'm sure Keith could too. Composting is such a great way to feed your garden and to divert your food waste from landfills. Oh, do you want to talk about CSA?
Yeah, I can do that. Two things. So, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about our respected farms. One other thing I was thinking about that feels really countercultural and really, I feel like I'm kind of like sticking it to the man a little bit, is like whenever you actually know your farmer and like talk to them, right? Because I feel like most of our food, it's not just accidental, I think, that we don't know where it comes from, right? It's a rather segregated system, and that's kind of on purpose, right? Because if you were able to go and visit the farm, you'd probably be less likely to buy that food, right? Like walking through a huge chicken factory, right? That sort of thing. So it feels super countercultural and fun. Like even I have 3 young boys, putting them all in the minivan and going over to the local pasture-raised meat farm, asking if we could just like check out the farm, and then being like totally on board with that of like, oh, actually you can go visit the farm where your food comes from. And so that feels really cool. to do that. But you can do that same type of thing just by meeting the farmer at the farmer's market, right? Having that quick conversation that Kate was talking about, like choosing to not let your food system be segregated like that, I think is pretty cool. And then CSAs. So actually this picture helps tell about that. So this is a box from our CSA shares. If I'm looking at what's in it, kind of looks like an early season one, right? So you see turnips and radishes and beets in there and carrots. So a CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture, or Customer Sustained CSA, sometimes the C and the S get changed a little bit, but a CSA is a subscription system, a subscription program. So customers can subscribe to a weekly or a bi-weekly box of whatever is harvested in season from that farm all season. So a customer would say at the beginning of the year, hey, I want to be a member this year. And the farmer says, great, it's a 16-week season or an 18-week season. Do you want to be weekly or bi-weekly? And they say weekly or bi-weekly. And then they just come pick up their box each week on the pickup day. Or sometimes certain farms will do delivery of those. And it's a business model that some early, especially like newer farms, it's really beneficial for them getting started, because CSA members, you're kind of like an investor, right? You're kind of like saying, hey, I want that to exist this year. Here's money up front, and I'm going to just eat what you guys provide all year. And you're sort of, it's kind of, a lot of people find it fun of like, I don't know what's going to be in our box this week, but we're going to have fun trying to make a recipe out of it. And we do a good job. I think like we have a CSA, and we send out recipes of like, hey, there's a whole lot of eggplant in your box this week. Do you know how to use eggplant? Here's some recipes, that sort of thing. Especially early on, right? This early box has turnips and radishes, beets. Yeah, there's Swiss chard is that yellow stalked stuff there. How to use that stuff. But that's a CSA. It's a model that works for some farms. It definitely is helpful in sustaining a farm, right? Like if a farm is fully dependent on that market sales, and that Saturday comes and it rains, okay, and nobody comes to the farmer's market, okay, that's a little bit vulnerable, especially for a startup farm. But a farm can really do well and get established with a CSA model, for example. So there's a few out there. So we have one. Ours is on a wait list for this year. A place that's in Noblesville that has plenty more openings is Teeter Organic Farm, with Katie, the farmer over there. And I just checked their website today. It seems like they still have openings for their CSA. And they do some delivery, at least if there's like 3 people in a general area, they'll kind of like do a group delivery if there's enough people in an area, if that makes sense. So that's CSAs. Okay. So a little bit more about St. Isadore Farm. So it's a farm on campus at Guerin Catholic High School, 6 years old. And the farm space is about 2/3 of an acre. It's just behind the school. And I was getting a little burnt out as a teacher 7 years ago, and my backyard garden was growing and growing, and I was thinking about making a switch. Maybe I want to go into growing food. And I started digging and realized I don't think I can make a living on that right away, at least. So I shouldn't quit my day job. But my principal, Mr. McNeely James, has always been super supportive of the idea from the get-go, and so he let me get this started. I got a little startup money from the Parent Guild at Guerin, and then the farm is able to really sustain itself with its business model of a CSA. We have a plant. We'll talk about a plant sale and a couple other ways of sustaining itself now. But our vision is a school deeply connected to God's creation. So we come at it from a Christian background, right? From a Christian perspective. And connection is that most important word for me. Is I feel like I was just talking about a segregation of the food system, but there's a whole lot of ways that we are segregated. We're disconnected from one another. That's what I try to do on the farm, is trying to get a lot of people in that school feel way more connected. Okay, connected to each other, connected to the environment, connected to their food. Food is the great. Everybody has to eat, and food is the great gatherer, right? And so we try to use food for connection. And then our mission, St. Isadore Farm is a school farm business, inviting students in the community into ecological education, sustainable food systems, and food justice. So the food justice piece, a lot of people have different definitions for justice. I see it as right relationship, right? When it comes to food, is everything in right relationship? Are people in right relationship when it comes to food? Are people in right relationship to others, to the land, to the food? And so we work to see how people are connected. So one example is like food deserts, right? Like areas where people don't have access to healthy food. That doesn't feel very just, right? Things aren't in right relationship there. So that's one of the examples of food justice. So a little bit more. So we have a class called Farming and Food Justice that goes in the spring and the fall. We're outside 3 or 4 days a week, depending on the weather, working the farm, okay, doing whatever's needed that week. And then on the inside days, we're teaching the course. I have 3 or 4 lessons that I try to get through over the course of the trimester. We're on trimesters there. So, yeah, indoor-outdoor class, kind of a hybrid. And, yeah, it's a pretty popular course. I have a waiting list every year now. And I was just talking to Kate about that. Like, we are a nonprofit. We do need to sustain ourselves. But, like, the number one reason that St. Isadore Farm would ever fail is if students just stop signing up for the course, right? Because that's an educational mission, right? Like, that's our number one goal, is the education piece. And so I put a lot of effort in making sure that students get a good experience that's worthwhile, and we get a waiting list every year for sign-ups there. And then we have a student internship over the summer. So, like, I kind of recruit 8 to 12 students to work a certain number of hours over the summer to keep our farm going that way. Yeah, a lot of our customers for the CSA there's a lot of staff members, right? That's a great perk of working there, is you teach all day on a Thursday, and then grab your vegetables on your way home on pickup day. And then a lot of student families are customers as well, same idea, right? I picked up my kid after school, and I can grab my veggies. And we have some just community members as well that round out our customer group. We fill about 30 boxes a week. Is kind of how many boxes of vegetables we're trying to fill a week. And that's grown. Like our first season, we did 8 just to kind of get started. And so it's grown every year. And we're starting a bouquet one this year, a bouquet subscription of flowers. Kate's teaching me how to grow flowers. I have never grown flowers before, but she tells me it can work and that people buy them. So I'm going to try it. And I don't know. That's probably it. I can answer questions. Oh, yeah. There's another set of pictures there of the students working the land. I've had some teachers ask me if they can, instead of sending kids to detention, if they could just send them out to pull weeds. And I try to resist that temptation because I want it to be a good experience on the farm and not just be an area of punishment. Okay, so how to get involved. So really, I think networking and connections always are the most important thing. So you can follow us on social media. We have a Facebook page that's just called St. Isadore Farm at Garin Catholic. We have an Instagram page, Farm St. Isadore is the tag there. We have a plant sale. We call it our Mother's Day plant sale, and that's right around this time. We're doing a lot of sales currently. I even brought some plants here. If you need your garden plants, I can sell some even tonight, or you can place an order and come pick it up. We have a couple spots left on our mixed bouquet CSA for this year, and I wanted to also plug Teeter, right? I don't have any room right now. I have a wait list for my veggie CSA, but Teeter Organic Farm has spots. So.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Again. This is Fields Market Garden. So we are a not-for-profit urban farm right here in Carmel. We are located on Smoky Row, just west of the Monon Trail and adjacent to the North End community. So being right next to North End, we are very much in partnership with them. North End provides a variety of housing and retail. And in their apartment buildings, there are 40 units set aside as attainable housing for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So our partnership with North End And a big part of our mission is to offer those folks employment opportunities, as well as engagement opportunities to integrate with the community, whether that be through volunteering, or we offer workshops and events, or even just fun activities. I know the North End folks do a walking club, and they usually stop by the garden and say hello if I'm still out there, which I usually am. And so it's just a really great space for that connection. I think connection is a common theme between Zach and I's farm and a couple other in our area as well. Connection with community and connection with food is just so important. And like Zach said, everybody's got to eat. So a little bit more about our vision. Engage with neighbors. We touched on that a little bit. Cultivating connections between the people and the earth. So that kind of goes towards my wanting to educate folks on the importance of spending time outdoors and growing their own food, and how to grow sustainably. So if you are ever at the farm volunteering, you'll probably hear me talking way too much about soil health or worms or something you don't really care that much about, but I do. So you're going to hear it. Let's see. How to get involved. So we are relatively new. I was talking to someone. 2023 was our first year of really growing and selling flowers, and we've introduced a handful of vegetables in between now and then. So we also offer a flower bouquet subscription, but that is full at this time. And we are growing more and more vegetables this year. So last year was our first year working with Joe's Butcher Shop. They helped us, they're over on Main Street, by the way. They helped us sell both our flowers and vegetables, and we'll continue working with them this year. We're also working with a classroom at Carmel High School. A teacher I've connected with there is teaching his students how to build, and so they're building us a farm stand as their class project for this semester. So we're hopeful to have that farm stand on site next week. There's an asterisk there, we don't know for sure. But anyways, we will have kind of a soft opening of our farm stand next week. So we'll have a small amount of veggies, we'll have some plants for sale, and of course, all of our branded gear. Let's see what else. Freeland's Restaurant at North End, they just opened up in February. The chef there is amazing, all the food is really fantastic, and we actually just took our first delivery of radishes over there earlier this week. So if you're there in the near future, make sure to make a reservation before. But the tartine on the menu has our radishes, so I'm going to try it tonight. I'm very excited. Another big way to get involved is volunteering. We have a few in the room that may be able to answer questions if you're interested. But we have lots of volunteer opportunities. In the summer, I have 4 to 5 days, depending on the week. Volunteers help us with everything from pulling weeds to harvesting veggies and arranging flowers. And another big volunteer responsibility at the farm is to work alongside our attainable residents from North End. So just helping them, make sure we're staying on task and doing things correctly. And I find that those volunteers get a lot of fulfillment and that connection piece. And additionally, a lot of our regular volunteers love coming back to the garden and are making friends with each other. And especially this year, I've just noticed a lot more camaraderie and connection building in the garden amongst our visitors and volunteers, and it's just so lovely to be a part of. Our monthly workshops and events are a great way to get introduced to the garden or to come for the first time because there's a little bit more structure there. Our next upcoming workshop is actually with Keith back there in the corner. We're going to be doing a composting workshop, and he's going to go through how to start a worm bin. So come out to the garden and join Keith and I to learn about vermicomposting. Lastly, we do take donations. So on the bottom of our website, there's a button where you can donate. And we will be launching a fundraiser this summer and fall. So keep your eyes out for more details on that. And then staying in touch. We are on Facebook and Instagram, just Fields Market Garden. And then my favorite way to tell people to stay in touch is to sign up for our monthly newsletter. So at the beginning of every month, I send out a newsletter, and that has all of, what's fresh at the garden, what events are coming up, what volunteer days are coming up. So that's a great way to just get a reminder at the beginning of every month of what's going on at the garden. And that's all we have for you. So thanks for listening.